Am I an idiot for telling my daughter she cannot marry a bigot? Some background. My wife and I worked and lived in a somewhat larger city where my daughter was born. My wife got a job opportunity in one of her employer's field offices and it was too good to pass up. We moved to the boonies when my daughter, Amy, was a preteen and we have been here ever since. The people are nice but we were quickly labeled as city folk and so we never really integrated very well. Amy came back the summer between her freshman and sophomore year. She got a summer job which is where she met her fiancé, Dan. We have had him over to the house countless times since then and he is polite, respectful, and he seems to truly love my daughter. He is a local and his family have been locals for generations. We rarely met up with his parents, but they also seemed nice when we did. They dated long distance all through her college years. This past summer they got engaged. His parents decided to throw an engagement last weekend at their house. We had never been there and I was excited to see the home where he grew up and meet his extended family. The party was fine. We did our best to fit in but, like I mentioned, we were from the city and they poked fun a little bit. His dad gave a speech and while it wasn't overtly racist, he mentioned how he was happy that his son found a nice white girl and looking forward to white grandbabies. As the night progressed, they started to share a bit of family history so that we would know the proud lineage our family would now be a part of. Without going into too much detail, they are descended from members of a hate group. We decided to be polite and not say anything but we didn't stay much longer. I let this stew for a few days until Amy returned home. She tells me that she was not aware of his family history but it doesn't change her mind. I don't want her marrying into this family and I told her so. She says Dan doesn't wholly believe what his parents do but I'm not convinced. You can't be raised to believe you are of a superior race and not of it become internalized to some degree. She assures me that they have a lifetime for her to point out all the ways his parents are wrong. But I am worried that if they never leave his hometown, there will be too much pushback from his family. I told her that I am going to be firm on this, that I don't want her marrying into that family. She called me an idiot and has been ignoring me ever since. I feel horrible but this isn't what I had hoped for her. So is she right? Am I being an idiot? Update. Not long after I posted, Amy came to me to apologize. I was surprised because based on the responses I was getting, I was preparing to apologize to her. She said she lashed out because she was trying to reconcile her relationship as she knew it with the new information about who he was. I asked her if she really had no idea and she said that, looking back, there were warning signs but nothing that would lead her to believe that he was overtly racist. I guess being long distance and liking him so much allowed her to remain mostly ignorant. She wanted to know what she should do. I told her that I was going to talk to Dan and try to get a beat on who he is apart from his parents. She seemed to think that was a good idea. A lot of people said that I was being unfair labeling him a racist before, but now that we have spoken I can tell you for certain that he is a racist. A lot of you were trying to figure out what Amy meant by him not being wholly racist and I think I can answer that now. He told me that he doesn't harbor any hatred for anyone, but he believes the white race will go extinct eventually and he is proud of who he is and of his race and he doesn't want that to happen. Which I guess also explains his father's comment about white grandbabies. I told him that his heritage is nothing to be proud of and that his beliefs will have no place in our family or in my household. He said that Amy seemed to understand him and that I might not have a choice of whether or not his beliefs will be a part of my family. I said that he was right. If Amy wants to move forward with the wedding then there is nothing I can do to stop her. He sneered and told me that he supposed we had nothing more to discuss and that was the end of it. I told Amy what me and him discussed and she decided to call it all off. She broke up with him and he has not taken too kindly to it. He has been to the house a lot so we decided to get her an apartment back in the city. Her work is going to start phasing back into the office anyway so the timing works out. His parents called us and came to speak with us a few times. At first they were just trying to figure out what was going on but it quickly turned into them berating us. I got some Reddit flack for not standing up to them initially so this time I made sure they knew where I stood. Not an idiot. Well, this is horrifying but also a huge relief. Amy found out now. She sought out counsel from someone she trusted. And Dan showed his ass and made her decision really easy. Good for you for keeping the lines of communication open in your family so that Amy knew she could come to you for support and advice. Not an idiot. If they decide to become more confrontational, I suggest getting a Ring doorbell and camera just in case things escalate. If they are small-minded country folk, they may try to push you around through their connections so better be prepared for more harassment and find a good lawyer that can help you. Did the mom overstep? Let me know in the comments. Now, you won't want to miss this next story. Am I an idiot for not agreeing to a paternity test unless my husband goes to therapy? I, female 28, and my husband, male 32, have a 3-year-old son together. There has never been any doubt that my husband is the father. I've never given him any cause for concern that I cheated on him. He acknowledges all of this. Last week, he came to me and said that for the last few months, he has been plagued, his word, with this anxiety that our son is not his. They don't look identical, granted, but they definitely share similar features and I see my husband whenever I look at my son. I was obviously blindsided by this. I had no idea he was having these thoughts. I asked him to explain why he thought that he wasn't his and he couldn't really provide any answer other than a gut feeling. He asked me if I would be okay if he got a paternity test done so it could ease his mind. I initially said absolutely not. No way in hell. I was very offended. He told me that he could just do it without my permission, and I said if he did that, I would never forgive him. My husband does not have a history of anxiety, but he did lose his job back at the start of the pandemic, so he's been with our son most of the time while I work my full-time job from home. I know this hasn't been easy on him. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but maybe he is starting to resent our son or something from just having to be around him constantly. After our heated first conversation, I spoke with some friends about it, and they said that he was probably having psychiatric problems due to the stress of not having a job. I came back to my husband and said that if he went to therapy and maybe started taking some anti-anxiety meds, that I would consider getting the test. He was very upset at this and said that once he got the results of the test back, he wouldn't be anxious anymore, and that I wasn't being fair by making him go through a whole rigmarole. Again, his word, just to get peace of mind, which was a phrase he used a lot during this. He again threatened to just get the test without my permission, and I said this would effectively end our relationship. I think there's something more serious going on here, and I thought that my solution here is as fair as I'm willing to be. My friends are divided. Some think I should just take the test, and others are saying he's being insane and that if I cave to this, there's just going to be something else. I need some neutral perspective here. Am I an idiot? Edit. I haven't read all the comments here because the amount of responses has been overwhelming. However, I want to say that I really do not appreciate strangers attempting to diagnose my husband over the internet. It is disgustingly presumptuous. I'm his wife and I don't feel qualified to do that, which is exactly why I want him to go to a licensed therapist. Another thing I'm seeing pop up is that I'm somehow demanding that he take medication. I said maybe medication, meaning that I only think he should be on medication if a licensed therapist prescribes them to him. I don't want to shove pills down his throat, which seems to be what some people think I want to do. As for the numerous suggestions of marriage counseling as opposed to individual therapy, I think this is a great idea. I didn't initially consider it because I was so focused on it being his problem, but we are ultimately a team, and I'll suggest that to him today. Hopefully, it goes better. Thanks everyone for your input. Update. Thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. Unfortunately, this is not a great update. If you don't want to read it all, the bottom line is we're heading toward divorce. I took some of the commenters' advice to go to couples therapy, which we did that same week as my first post. I had to push him a bit to get him to agree to the therapy, but I told him it was either this or I would never give in to the test. The first Zoom session was a little awkward since neither of us had ever done therapy before. After listening to both of us, she basically said that she thought we should do the test to see if that eases his anxiety, and that if it doesn't, which, at the time, was my concern, that we could go from there. So my husband was thrilled and I agreed, but I wanted to be on Zoom with the therapist when we received the results so we could talk it out with her there, which he was fine with. So we did the test and we did our Zoom session when our results were in. And surprise, surprise, the paternity test says he's 99% likely to be the father. He didn't appear relieved or happy or anything of what I expected. Maybe this was unfair, but I did expect him to cry and maybe apologize to me for his lack of trust. This wasn't just my imagination though, because when the therapist asked him in our first session how he would feel if the test came back saying he was the father, he said he would feel relieved. But he was angry. He kept saying that it was over and that he didn't want to talk about it. He kept repeating it's done over and over when the therapist would try to ask a question about how he was feeling, and he was obviously not listening when I tried to talk about my feelings. And when I told him I wanted to talk about it, he yelled at me, which he never does. What else is there to freaking talk about? I was mortified that he was talking to me this way in front of a therapist, and she said we should schedule a new session once he had time to process. After the session, he wouldn't look at me or speak to me. That he was so upset that he was our wonderful son's father made me absolutely lose my mind. We screamed at each other and it ended with me saying that I can't do this anymore. He's at his brother's apartment now, finally away from our son, which is obviously what he wanted all along. And my mom is now staying at my place to help me out around the house. I texted him this weekend asking if he wanted to do another therapy session, and he asked if I really thought that would help, and I had to admit that I didn't. The speed at which this whole thing happened, just a month ago, I would have said we have a happy marriage, is still completely shocking to me. But I don't see us recovering from this. This felt cathartic to type out though, so thanks I guess. And TA, I'm sorry it turned out like this. I have a feeling he has some deeper issue and he was never going to accept any answer other than he's not the father because he's got it in his head now. I hope he gets the help he needs, and I hope you find peace in your future. Not an idiot. I think he already wanted to end the marriage for whatever reason. And the paternity thing was just a ruse. He probably figured either you'd be so outraged that it could send you two into a downward spiral in which you'd look like the bad guy for refusing to do the test. Or maybe there was some chance he wasn't the father and he could then feel righteous in his reasoning for leaving you. Do you think the husband is crazy? Now, this next story is a head scratcher. Am I an idiot for not waking my partner up and causing him to miss a family trip? My female 26 and my partner, male 28, have 5 daughters, 7, 6, 4, 3 and 5 months. For a long time there's been an issue with him getting up to help with the kids of a morning. He thinks he should be able to sleep in on his days off work, while I think he should get up when the kids and I do, or we should at least be alternating who lies in a bed. We've been seeing a therapist who has mentioned he should be helping more in the mornings. Recently we had a family trip planned to the zoo with both of our parents, our sisters and their kids. Previously when we've gone out for the day I've needed to shake my partner awake several times, and he lies in bed while I get the kids ready. He'll finally get up 5 minutes before we leave as I shout at him I'm getting in the car. I've mentioned to him that this is very frustrating as it's a lot of work getting the kids ready to go out, and it's not fair to leave it up to me while he lies in bed. He'd apologize and promise that the next time he'd get up and help. The night before the trip I told him I'd need him to be awake at 6:30 a.m. so we could get everyone ready to leave by 8 a.m. He said he'd set an alarm and we went to bed. My alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. and I got up while my partner kept sleeping. I decided I wasn't going to wake him this time and continued getting the kids ready. At 8 a.m. he was still sleeping, so I loaded the kids in the car and we set off. We arrived at the zoo at 9:30 a.m. and his family asked where he was. I mentioned he was still in bed and chose not to come. At 10:15 a.m. I got a phone call from him asking where everyone was. I said we went to the zoo as planned, and I waited for him to get up but he never did. He got really mad and told me that I should have woken him up like I always do, and I caused him to miss the trip. He then called his mom and complained to her, who yelled at me in the middle of the zoo that I was being unfair, and I should have given him a shake to let him know he needed to get up, and that I was about to leave. My mother jumped in and said it wasn't my responsibility to get him out of bed, and he needed to take responsibility for himself. A few more words were exchanged and his family stalked off for the rest of the trip. I had a blast with my kids, parents, sister, and my nephews. When we got home my partner started on me again about how I should have woken him up. So am I an idiot for not waking him up and going without him? A few things have come up I want to clarify. 1. He wasn't always like this. When the oldest two were little he was always up with them. He even gets up anyway to cook breakfast before going off to work. We had to move in with his parents at one point and that's where things started to change. His family are incredibly misogynistic. Dad works then comes home, watches TV and drinks beer while his mom does everything else, including getting him up for work etc. These beliefs seem to have rubbed off on him, and his mom is very quick to tell him something is the woman's job. 2. He's seeing a therapist independently who has suggested some form of depression. 3. He's generally pretty good otherwise. He will help with dinner, cleaning, putting the kids to bed etc. He's not entirely useless. Getting out of bed in the morning is a long-standing issue though. 4. He has a vasectomy after baby number 4, which turned out to be incomplete. I had a hysterectomy. Update. After posting this I received messages expressing concern and advice so I thought I'd update about how things turned out. The morning after this incident my partner got out of bed when the kids did and took the older girls out for breakfast. Later I asked him if he'd be willing to read the thread and he agreed. He was very subdued afterwards and didn't say much except for agreeing that he was in awe. The next day he took off work and saw his GP, started on antidepressants, and we had a long talk. He was ashamed by how he was acting and to see strangers comparing him to children. He cried when realized how much he was letting everyone down, especially his daughters who will grow up thinking this is normal behavior. He confirmed that this all started when we lived with his parents a few years back. He left home at 17 to get away from his mother, and she told him he'd fail as men need a woman to look after them. He felt like a failure so it was easy for his mother to feed him other ideas, and she would also manipulate things I did to look like he was incompetent as a person. For example, I'd tell him to relax and I'd handle the dishes, and his mother twisted it into me thinking he was incompetent, so he should just stop helping at all. He'd wake up feeling useless, and she managed to convince him that he was unhappy because I wasn't taking care of him the way a wife should. He decided to get no contact with her, which didn't go well. She cried and told him he was a horrible son for abandoning his mother, and that I was trying to control him by forcing him to do it. He blocked her, but she just used different numbers to continue calling him. After a week or so he ended up changing his number, and we haven't heard from his family since. He brought up that he was unhappy at work as it wasn't stimulating enough, but he felt like he couldn't leave. I offered to pick up some part-time work but he said no. He talked to his boss and took some time off, and eventually quit. He spoke to my dad who used some connections and got him a good job at his company. The new job is a primarily work-from-home position, so he is able to help with the girls more and has more free time. He is able to take the girls to school and watch them play while he works, which they all enjoy. Before he started the new job he booked a trip for us to go to the snow for a week. We had a blast and it was lovely to see him relaxed and happy and enjoying our girls and life. He's promised to be more honest about how he's feeling and our relationship has improved immensely. Thank you to everyone who gave judgment and advice, as he says it really helped him see things more clearly, especially the toxic relationship with his mother. Not an idiot. Everyone's always quick to tell people to break up in this forum. It's so nice to see that you worked it out, together, built communication and something good came from it. I'm very proud of him. And you, no idiots here. In some ways, being able to admit mistakes and try to do better is a more admirable quality than getting it right the first time. That won't make the ache you went through in the past better, but at least you can trust in your partner trying to do his best in the future.